Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So the Texas Attorney General has launched an investigation into US Masters Swimming for allowing a male athlete to take up to 5 national titles in a women's competition, women's events. They do have a transgender participation policy that does allow men who identify as transgender to compete in women's swimming if they keep their testosterone levels under 5 nanomoles. They have to have been doing that for a year. They have to have documentation saying that they've been doing that. And they have to prove their testosterone levels before competing. But 5 nanomoles is still way above that of females. And this person has been competing in swimming since 2009. This male athlete didn't enter into women's swimming as a transgender athlete. This person entered into women's swimming as a female athlete. Same thing with CrossFit. So this athlete's name is Hugo, but he competed as a woman using the name Hannah. And then suddenly, after having a lot of success as a quote-unquote female athlete, this person then changes their name. And people were asking why? Why would you change your name when you've been very successful competing in CrossFit and swimming? And this name is becoming well known in these circles. Why would you change your name? Well, it turns out there were complaints made to CrossFit about this person from as far back as 2016. People were writing, sending emails and saying that this person is male, yet competing in the women's category. And thank you to the people who have sent me information. They've sent me screenshots, they've sent me emails. I've even heard from women who have competed against this person. One female swimmer confirmed that they were unaware that this person is male. They certainly noticed the differences, even though the female swimmers, many of them are built like swimmers, they have broad shoulders, upper body strength, but they still noticed the difference. And one of them told me that they could tell that this person had at least 30 to 40 pounds on them, 30 to 40 pounds of muscle. But they didn't know that men were allowed to compete in their category. She said she wasn't even aware of the transgender policy. So many female athletes are competing against men and don't even know it. They're giving these people the benefit of the doubt, not knowing that no, the person looks the way they look because they are male. And CrossFit have been aware that this person is male for the longest time, at least since 2016. Yet Anna was still allowed to compete against women. But back then, male athletes were not allowed to compete in the women's category. And even the transgender policy for the US Masters Swimming, that came about in 2015. With swimming, Hannah was competing from as early as 2009. So again, despite male athletes actually being banned from competing in women's categories, Hugo was able to compete. So after the complaints were made and CrossFit were notified of this person's true identity, Hannah suddenly becomes Anna. And that is the name of his sister. So Hugo went from Hannah to now Anna. And it's alleged that he took his sister's name to have access to identification. CrossFit, in 2014, were involved in a lawsuit. A transgender athlete filed the lawsuit against them, claiming discrimination for not being allowed to compete in the women's category. The person claimed discrimination and intentional infliction of emotional distress. So CrossFit reached a settlement with the transgender athlete, but they didn't change their policy until 2019. It was announced the previous year. And all that time, Hannah or Anna was competing in the women's category. So this is what a blog post written about Anna Caldas said about the whole name change. Hannah likes to post on Instagram and Facebook about her travels around the world, working out and sweating with others. This photo shows a passport and named ticket from recent travel with the name Anna, not Hannah. Travel isn't cheap. It's not just the price of the travel, the cost of being able to be away. Not only do you need to be able to pay your way, you need to be able to have time. If you follow Hannah on Instagram or Facebook, she travels more than she stays put. Rumour has it that she gets paid to compete on teams internationally. To be clear, that rumour is completely unconfirmed. But with Hannah / Anna, there was a lot of documented speculation. We'd like to think that Hannah is independently wealthy and can do whatever she feels like whenever. Period. She's Anna. Oh wait, who is she? To travel internationally, that ticket has to match that passport. Maybe it's just me, but is it normal for sisters to have passports with the same name, especially if one is residing in the United States on a visa? I still don't get it. Blow it up, it says Anna. So in this section here, you can see the name on the ticket, it says Anna. So this person is traveling under the name Anna. Maybe Hugo officially changed his name to Anna. I don't know. This same blogger sent an email to a coach informing him about Caldas being male. And this coach proceeded to gaslight the blogger and tell her that Caldas has passed all of the doping tests, that Caldas is competing legitimately, knowing full well that doping tests test for performance-enhancing substances, performance-enhancing drugs. It doesn't test for whether somebody is male competing in a women's competition. It doesn't test for naturally occurring testosterone that obviously males will have a lot more of. It doesn't test for upper body strength, muscle mass, bone density, all of the advantages males have over women. And this was before they changed their policy. So this coach of CrossFit Anywhere knew that Hugo was male, but still used Hugo to compete at CrossFit regionals.
Good general CrossFit coaches. I worked with Blair Morrison, who was one of the original guys in CrossFit, been to the games 3 times, a lot of experience, and I have the chance to work with him on a daily basis and learn a lot from him. And so all of my combined experience over 5 years and having to learn to really catch up with everybody that has been doing gymnastics made me, and having the time, because I do this full time, so I have the time to really spend and trial and error, So,
hi guys, I'm editing here and I was about to post a video, but at the last minute I checked my emails and I actually heard back from Hugo's former coach, Blair Morrison. I sent him an email because I wanted to give him an opportunity to respond to everything I revealed in the video, that he was informed about Hugo being male, Hugo or Anna, and they still allowed this person to compete in CrossFit. They still allowed this person to compete in a competition for CrossFit Anywhere as a female athlete. So, I wanted to know if he stood by that decision, because it was a long time ago, 2016, 9 years now we're talking. It was a long time ago. A lot could have changed by then. There's plenty of people who have changed their mind on this topic. Before they were all for it, males competing in women's sports if they identify a certain way. But now they've seen the repercussions with their own eyes. So I wanted to check with him to see where he stands on this topic today. I didn't know what to expect. I just emailed him and he responded saying, I would be willing to discuss this with you. So I was like, great. But I don't know whether I'm going to get on the call with somebody and they're going to be like, trans women are women, or curse me out. I don't know. But thankfully we had a very pleasant conversation and I was explaining that this isn't about doping and testing for performance enhancing drugs. Usain Bolt has not been involved in any doping scandals, as far as I'm aware, but that doesn't mean that he can compete in a women's category. We're talking about who is male and who is female. And gender testing is not one of the tests given when it comes to, testing for doping or testing for cheating. Him simply being male means that he was competing in the wrong category. And first of all, he made it clear that he is not for men competing in women's sports, that he is against that. But at the time, when he was informed on this, he was too focused on just defending this person. He felt it was his duty as a coach to defend this person. And he didn't believe 100% that this person was male. And he defended his athlete. That's what he believed he was doing at the time, defending his athlete, because the name of the blog that detailed all the information about what was going on was kind of poking fun, out of the situation. Hannah Manor. It took me a while to get it, but it was basically a play on words. And it kind of got him defensive. So, that was his response. So whatever you make of that, I'll leave that to you. But he did seem, had a very pleasant conversation. He seemed sincere. And he said he's not for men in women's sports. And he did allow this person to proceed in that competition back then, even though, this was after he received the email. He's saying that he still wasn't 100% sure that this person was male. So he felt it was important to defend this person, especially if, this was a woman, quote unquote, who just looked a certain way and was being targeted. That's the approach he was taking. And I don't know what came of the investigation. There was a complaint filed. This was brought to their attention that this person is male, and a complaint was filed. But he said nothing came of it. And he did agree that he probably was using his sister's ID to enter into competitions. I don't know about the passport. We were discussing how he managed to get a passport with that name. Does the passport say male or female? We don't know. I mean, is it his passport? I wouldn't put it past anybody, but in terms of the identification to compete in the women's competition, more than likely, yes, he was using his sister's ID to get into those competitions. And, some people might think, well, how do you not know? You were given information and you still allowed this person to proceed in competing in the women's category. But US Swimming Masters has allowed this person to compete for a very long time as a woman, not even as a transgender athlete. I don't even believe this person was subject to their transgender policy. Because as far as I'm concerned, this male athlete presented himself as a female and fooled a lot of people, including the coach I spoke to, who is maintaining that he was deceived, he was misled. So yeah, I thought I'll interject to let you know what the coach is saying today in 2025. But it's up to you. Some people, that won't be good enough for a lot of people because they will say, how did you not know? And that's very, very valid. And it's a very upsetting situation to know that this person can use his sister's ID, allegedly, and enter into the women's category and be taken to be a female athlete. So we discussed the importance of introducing gender tests. I was explaining the importance of introducing that, and I think he agreed that it is actually necessary. So back to the video. So even up until this point, at the recent events that the US Masters Swimming is being investigated for, there's no evidence that Hugo is even competing as a transgender athlete. This person is still saying that I'm a female athlete. This person is still being presented as a female athlete. This male athlete needs to be stripped of all titles, all records, all accolades that rightfully belong to female athletes. So Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has launched an investigation into US Masters Swimming after the organization allowed a transgender swimmer to compete in women's events at the 2025 Spring Nationals in San Antonio. In a press release issued Monday, the Attorney General's office said the investigation will determine if US Masters Swimming engaged in false, deceptive, and misleading acts and practices. The policy of the US Masters Swimming, which allows men to compete in women's events, is reprehensible and could violate Texas's consumer protection laws. Not only is the policy insulting to female athletes, but it also demonstrates deep contempt for women and may violate Texas law. I will fight to stop these unfair policies and never back down from defending the integrity of women's sports. So on their own website, it lists Caldas' achievements, and it goes back as far as 2009. So this person did compete in mixed relays, but Hannah wasn't competing as a man in the mixed relay. Hannah competed as a woman, as a female athlete. And then we have freestyle relay, women's 25 plus in 2010, 200 freestyle as a woman. And these are all the female athletes that this person would have competed against. How many of them were even aware that this person is male and simply gave Hugo the benefit of the doubt? Hannah also competed in women's relays as well. 200 meter freestyle relay, for example. So all the way back in 2009, Hannah was competing as a female athlete, not a transgender athlete, because they weren't allowed to compete in women's competitions back then, but as a female athlete. And they didn't change their policy until 2015. But even up until now, it appears that Hannah, or Anna, or Hugo, is still competing as a female athlete. So the female athlete who reached out to me, thankfully, she said that she wasn't in the locker room with this person and she doesn't know much about that. But this person was presenting themselves as female, so he would have been allowed to undress and change in the locker room. However, it probably wouldn't be wise since all would be revealed. She said that this person didn't really interact with the other athletes, with the female athletes, and would come to the blocks at the last minute, perhaps not to draw attention to himself. So Anna won the 50 free, 100 free, and 50 breast, 100 breast, and 100 meters. So I'm so glad the Texas Attorney General is investigating this. You know, Texas don't play when it comes to this sort of thing. Caldas, who has competed in the women's division in CrossFit competitions dating back to 2012, was previously a competitive swimmer in a male division in the early 2000s before transitioning. The good news is that this year, CrossFit did update their transgender policy. Ahead of the CrossFit Games season, they updated their policy to say that athletes must now compete in the category that matches their sex at birth. So there's that. That is good news at least. So the World Aquatics policy that came into effect in 2022 said that male to female transgender athletes would only be eligible to compete in the women's categories if they transitioned before the age of 12 or before they reached stage 2 on the puberty Tanner scale, which again, obviously I don't agree with that policy either. I think you should just be required to be female. It's very simple, but at least it does eliminate the majority of male athletes trying to compete in the women's competition. The policy also says athletes who have previously used testosterone as part of female to male gender affirming hormone treatment would only be eligible to compete in women's competitions if the testosterone was used for less than a year in total. The treatment didn't take place during puberty, and testosterone levels in serum were back to pre-treatment levels. They did introduce an open category though. And you know what? None of the male athletes, none of the transgender athletes were interested in that category. I believe it was at an event in Berlin in 2023 where not one transgender athlete showed up to compete in the open category. They're only interested in competing against women, where they can win 5 national titles, where they can win NCAA championships, where they can even try out for the Olympics. Caldas was an Olympic hopeful back in 2012, but fell short of qualifying for the London Olympics in the 50 meters freestyle. Fell short by 0.3 seconds. That's when Caldas turned to CrossFit. Even the trial itself was a place taken away from a woman. Texas's consumer protection laws prohibit a long list of deceptive trade practices and any unconscionable action or course of action, which is anything that takes advantage of a person's lack of knowledge, ability, experience, or capacity. It could be ruled that there was a violation if it is argued that female athletes were misled about the fairness or rules of the competition, for example. And the female athlete who reached out to me, she was misled because she didn't even know about this policy that allows males to compete against female athletes on the US Masters swimming under their policy, and that she didn't even know that she was competing against a male athlete. When they introduce these policies, they're very sneaky about it. These sporting bodies, they're very sneaky about it. The women are blindsided, they're misled, they're not even given a heads up. They don't seek their consent if they're happy about it, if they're okay with it. They don't care. All to bow to gender ideology. Why? So yes, I hope US Masters Swimming is held accountable for allowing this in the first place, for allowing it to go on for as long as it has gone on for. Icons wrote a letter to US Masters Swimming last month saying there is no length of time during which testosterone suppression eliminates male advantage. Therefore, it should not serve as a guidance permitting men to compete in women's swimming. At a minimum, it is the US MSC's responsibility to enforce its current policy. If you're male, you shouldn't be competing in a women's category. I don't care what identification you have. I don't care what names you use. If you're male, you're male, and always will be male. And evidently, this person clearly has physical advantages over the female athletes. This cannot continue to occur in women's competitions. It must be put to an end. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.